first thing I hear is people screaming, I tend to freeze up.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Headspace by Ladies First. And the last episode we actually talked about anxiety, and today we'll be focusing on another topic that I believe many have heard of.
That's right, so today we'll be talking about PTSD, also known as post-traumatic stress disorder. So PTSD is developed when one experiences or witnesses a distressing event. So even though these traumatic events have ended, people with PTSD tend to have long-lasting and life-altering consequences.
Yeah, so today we have Dr. Elaine Yeo with us to share more on this topic.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Elaine. I'm a clinical psychologist from Promises Healthcare, and I primarily work with people who struggle with anxiety and trauma.
So to kick off this topic, perhaps you can share with us what PTSD and why people actually develop PTSD.
So PTSD is a mental health condition that can develop when we experience an event that is just so shocking, so scary, so dangerous, that it shakes the very core foundations of how we view ourselves, how we view others, and how we view the world. As to why it develops, well, one possible reason could be that trauma can affect our body's stress response. When we experience a stressful event, what happens is our mind will perceive it as danger, okay? Then it will activate our body's fight, flight, or freeze response. Basically, that's the survival response. It's our mind and body's way of trying to protect us from potential harm. In the case of trauma, because it's so distressing, it's so overwhelmingly stressful, what can happen is that your body stays in that survival mode because it continues to see everything else as threatening, keeps trying to keep you safe. There's been studies that show that trauma can affect the parts of the brain that regulate emotions and also help us to detect threat.
From my understanding, there's a lot of different types of PTSD. There's not just one type of PTSD, right? So can you explain each type of PTSD?
One is, of course, PTSD itself. The second one is acute stress disorder. And the third one is complex PTSD, or shortened to CPTSD.
One of my experiences actually been with this person, a partner. I don't know if it is PTSD, but he has issues that drains me as well. I feel like self-blaming.
Why are you blaming yourself?
Because, I don't know, some people are really good at making you the problem though. So is it curable? It is, right? Is it?
Strictly speaking, I think most mental health conditions are not curable in the definition of the word, but it's absolutely treatable, which means with treatment it is possible to resolve symptoms and to live a life that you enjoy.
So what would be like a good way for you to like cure it or make it better for the other person or for yourself?
It can be helpful to seek help, so therapy, medication, or a combination of both. Other than that, I think it's like what Dan said, it's a lot of communication and conversation.
So let's just say if I'm suffering or anything, I would choose to go play basketball or even karaoke with my friends, at least something that I enjoy doing, be active.
Right, I think what's important is figuring out for yourself how much is working for you. It's noticing for yourself, okay, is this coping helping me temporarily? But then in the long run, it actually could be bringing you more shame or more pain or more distress. So for example, a common coping is sleeping, right?
Really? The first thing I think about is like alcohol.
Yeah. So that's another one.
Mine is comedy. I guess so. I turn everything into a joke.
Humor.
Yeah, humor, I guess.
Yeah, it can be a coping mechanism, but yeah, sleeping is a common one. Watching Netflix, watching TV, that's why it's like we don't think about it. And that's well and good. But I think once I start hearing that I sleep so much that I didn't get my homework done. So that's what I mean by where the coping could have actually caused you more problems. And it might be time to look into what kinds of coping would help you in the long run and not just temporarily.
So you need to find a balance with the long run and like running away for a while.
So you can cope with it, but just make sure you cope with it enough. Like not too much of a good thing is not good.
It's about moderation. Yeah.
So there's this article by Today Singapore that mentioned that almost 2 in 3 Singaporeans, adult population, have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience in the first 18 years of their lives. What are some of the potential psychiatric consequences of experiencing childhood trauma?
There is research that shows that strong association basically between childhood trauma and later mental illness in adulthood. So in other words, the experience of childhood trauma can increase our risk of developing mental illness when we become adults.
I don't know. I find that childhood experiences affect us either way. Like if you're too stern to your child, they're gonna come out like introvert or something.
Correct. So if more people are suffering from childhood PTSD, does that mean that as a society we should change some of our parenting methods? And like, what are some of your advice to the younger parents out there?
My short answer to the first question is yes. My long answer is still yes. But also wanting to be fair to our older generation of parents, there wasn't much talk about mental health. There was a lot more focus on practical needs, right? Food, making sure the children have a house, making sure they're earning enough so they can provide all these basic needs. Not much, if at all, focus on the emotional or psychological aspects. They probably never learned how to set firm limits on their children without resorting to punishment. There's more conversations, there's more awareness, there's social media, there's more books about parenting, so there's more information out there. So I do think it's a good time, I think, for parents to learn and to change with the times.
We know that the topic of mental health is gaining traction and more people are open to talking about it now. But trauma is still an underrepresented topic, right? Do you agree that there is a very limited knowledge of trauma in our community? And what do you think our society should improve on?
But again, in my own personal experience, I think there's still quite a bit of stigma when it comes to trauma. There tends to still be a lot of minimization of traumatic experiences. So I do think we could have more conversation as a society about trauma and its effects. We could have more conversation about how to talk about trauma, right? And that could be done through panel discussions, workshops, interviews across different media and platforms. And that could involve trauma survivors sharing about their experiences. It could involve mental health professionals sharing their knowledge. So all of that could be really helpful, I think, in creating conversation. And the more we openly talk about these topics, the more it reduces the stigma and shame surrounding it. So I think kudos to you and Ladies First for doing exactly that.
I think now the generation, the younger generation is more accepting of mental illness and also all of this as well.
Yeah, because I think my generation, why do I sound so old? But I think myself as a millennial, right, we don't really acknowledge it so much. Even I don't know whether I'm suffering from PTSD. I just tell my friends my problems and they assume that I have PTSD and they say you might want to seek help, and I'm like, dude, I'm 30, I survived this long, I don't need help. You know what I mean? But I think I do have some underlying PTSD because I only recently found out about this again because I think about a few weeks back, our producer asked me what's my PTSD is about, and I realized that I've never actually told anyone about this problem. I think I have this PTSD when it comes to similar to door slamming, but when I wake up in the morning, if the first thing I hear is people screaming from the other side of the door, I tend to freeze up. I cannot move, I cannot function. So I'm sure some of the viewers out there share something similar with me, maybe not as extreme or maybe even more. So what would you advise that they should do, and who should they reach out to?
So I think some of my suggestions would be to talk to people whom you trust and feel safe with about their experiences with therapy, if you know anyone. You could also check out what supports and services are available in Singapore.
I've been to therapy
you
before, yes, but not for PTSD.
And for what?
During COVID, actually, I went through quite a hard transition and a hard time. I feel like I almost lost everything during COVID period. Oh, I feel like I'm about to tear out. I mean, I talk to my friends. It's different compared to like talking to a therapist or a professional. So I actually went to this therapist. I think it's a website. So I just type it out, or how I feel, and we will have like a session, an hour session. In a way, it helps me express myself. So in a way, the therapist helped me. He gave me like some coping mechanisms. For example, when I'm having anxiety, what I can do is like 5 senses. But I didn't know this 5 senses thing actually works as well. So yeah, open to it. So have you been to therapy?
I was close to going to one at one point in time. Then I decided, you know what? Instead of therapy, why don't I just go on a mental health day? So I went to the zoo. It was fun. It was fun.
I'm not saying it's not fun. I think you're just not addressing the issue.
Okay, for me, right, personally, I share my problems with my friends, but I don't share my lifelong PTSD with my friends, you know what I mean? And you know, growing up in a Asian household, they will always tend to say, you know what, you don't have any mental problems, you know, you're just growing up, it's okay. So because I believe like, you know, our parents didn't really have the mental help that they had during their time, so maybe they think that maybe we don't need it. Because I think indirectly my parents have succeeded in like passing down their idealism to me. Because to me, honestly, I think if I'm gonna be a dad, I will do some like corporal punishment, but also like to a certain point where I will be open to talk to my kids. Because I do want them to be like the better version of me, if that makes sense.
I think that's what every parents want. They want like your child to be like a better version, because no one wants like their fault to like, you know, keep on going for generations, right?
Yeah.
It's hard for us to actually express our emotions to our family or our parents about how we feel. I was raised in that kind of household as well, where you can do this, but they never ask me like, hey, how are you feeling? Are you okay? So whenever I'm having issues or having problems, I usually would go to my friends. I would tell them, hey, this is how I feel, and they'll be like, oh, I feel this way too.
But why is it that it's so hard for people to actually talk to their direct family and instead like seek refuge in friends?
I don't know. I just feel like there's a barrier. There's like, I cannot cry in front of them.
I think that's why there's this growing concept, and we see that in the media, in movies and dramas as well, of found family. So if family and home doesn't feel like a safe place, we find our own family. It could be friends. My second point was about the topic of emotions. Most likely, our parents, our older generation of parents, if you were to ask them, let's talk about emotions, they'd be quite confused, right? Because I don't think, you know, it's because it's something that's learned, right? Being able to identify our emotions, what we're feeling, being able to talk about it in words about what we're feeling.
But there is such thing as family therapy, right?
Yes.
So the whole family actually come down?
Yes, the nuclear family unit would come down. I recommend that when it comes to childhood trauma, especially if it's a youth, right? They're still living in the same house. They're still very much a family unit, right? So often I would recommend it.
So this is the end of the episode of Headspace by Ladies First, and we hope that you guys have learned so much information about PTSD so we can empathize and also better support those who are suffering from it.
Yep. And we also like to thank Dr. Elaine for coming down and sharing your professional opinions on trauma, and also for all of you watching out there, please seek help from mental health professionals if you need to, and always remember to be kind to one another because you're not sure what other people might be going through. Yeah?
With that, we'll see you guys in the next episode of Headspace.
Do remember to subscribe and watch our latest video. Bye-bye!
Bye!